Welcome back. Next, we're going to wrap up the Museum of Candy website by adding in these sections at the bottom where we have some text and an icon and then a large photo, and then they alternate sides, different images. The text is all the same for now, but this would be content that varied depending on what you were actually, this would be information about the Museum of Candy and hours or local address or whatever. And remember that the icon here does disappear. There it goes. So it comes and goes. Things stack, so we'll have to play around with the order a bit. I already mentioned that. Where here, the text is on top of the image, and then the text is on top of its corresponding image. But when we expand it, this image actually came before this in the row. So we'll play around with reordering things. Anyway, here's what we have to start. So let's go ahead and open up our code and go to our index.html. And after our heading section, which is right here, I'm going to come down and I'm going to make another section. And this one, I'm going to make a container fluid again, which is just like what we did up top to make this section. We want our images to go all the way across. Well, not all the way across, but we don't want any spacing on the side. So container fluid, and we'll do the same thing where we add in the px0 just to remove all padding from the side. There's a tiny bit we get for free. Inside of that, we're going to make a row. So let's do that now. So a div, give it the class of row. And then if we look at how it's broken up, it's just 50-50 again. So we'll worry about the spacing later, this extra margin. But 50-50, so that's going to be 6 and 6 units. So we'll have our row. And then inside of the row, we're going to have a column 6. And 2 of those actually. Div column 6, div column 6. And in the first one, we're going to put this image, which is called milk.png. So that's inside of that first row. We'll do an image, and it has the source of images/milk.png, and we're going to give it that class, if I can spell class, of image fluid, just like we did up top. And save, and we should at least have the image taking up 50% of the screen. It looks good. Now, right now I have it to be 50-50 always, and we're going to need to change that. So if we look at the breakpoint where it's happening, they're stacking, they're stacking small, extra small, and we hit medium, they expand. So let's change this to be column medium 6, both of those, and refresh. Now once we hit small, there we go, it stacks. Now we need to add in some text on the right side. So the way that I did this is a little tricky because if you pay close attention, you'll notice this is divided in half. So this is half, and this whole square of space is the other 6. But this content doesn't go all the way across. Actually, if we inspect it, you'll see that it's contained in a box inside of that 6. And I did that because I didn't like how it looked when the text went all the way across and it was really sort of thin. Well, thin is the wrong word. It was very short as far as its height, and it went all the way across. It just didn't look good. So what I did is I used the grid system again. I nested a row inside of this column. So if we have 6 and 6, then ignore all of that and just focus on this square over here. Inside of that, we have 12 units again. And I said, this should take up 8 units out of that 12, and it should be centered. Then as you shrink it down, I thought that was too narrow, so I actually, you can see right there, it grows, and this is 10 units out of 12 now. So it's kind of hard to tell, but I'm going to show you what it looks like. Let's put our text in there first without actually any of the nested stuff that I was talking about. So inside of this column medium 6, we could just start by adding an h2 with the class of, well, we need to center the text, but we can actually center everything together. So I'm going to just do an h2 for now, and it says Museum of Candy. And then below that, there is the icon, which is an image, and it's called lolly_icon.png. So it's images / I'm not sure how you spell lolly, if it's supposed to be with a Y, but that's how I spelled it. Apologies if that's confusing. And then we'll worry about getting it to display or hide and show in just a bit. And then below that, we have a paragraph with the class of lead. So lead just makes it stand out a little bit more. You could get away without doing that. And I'm just going to steal the block of lorem ipsum I had, or you can just type whatever you'd like there. And save. Let's see what we get. Okay, so first of all, nothing is centered vertically or horizontally. So the text center part is pretty easy. We can just come to our row and say text center. And now the text is centered. Now, as far as making it centered vertically, the property for that, if we're talking about the Flexbox utilities, is called align items. So we have all this space here. How do we distribute it vertically? We use align items. If we had excess horizontal space, it's justify content. So we're going to want align items center. So we'll come up to our row, align dash items center. Refresh. Now it is centered. But notice how it looks here. I wasn't a fan of this. Maybe if we had more text, it would look good, but I don't like how this looks. So what I did, and same thing here, I want a little spacing, but not a ton of spacing, but a little, as you can see, on the sides. But then as we grow it, there's even more spacing on the original. So I ended up nesting another row inside, as I've already mentioned. So we're going to do that now. Basically, I'm going to take all of my content right here. I'm going to cut it out for a moment, and I'm going to make another div with the class of row. And inside of this, I'm going to make another column. So when I say class equals row, I get 12 new units of space to work in, and I'm going to use up 10 of them to start. So it's going to be column 10. And put my content in there and save. And if I refresh, you can see now that I'm basically using 10 out of 12 of these units, but it's not centered where I want it to be. So we're using 10, and then there's 2 over here. What I want to do is have those 10 be in the middle. So what I could do is just make another column 1, not colt, column 1 right there, except it has to be a div, of course. So like this, and then an empty one before, and then an empty one afterwards, like this. But I don't really like that approach, but it is centered now because we have 1, 10, and 1. But the better way is to just use the flex utilities to center it horizontally. And to center it horizontally rather than vertically, it's justify content center. That's how we control, well, okay, it doesn't look any different, but if I remove it, you'll see it's not centered. I add it back in, or let's change it to justify content end. It is centered, or it's not centered. It moves to the end. Anyway, so justify content center is what we want. So I think this spacing actually looks fine, but if we look at the version that I did, I even had it narrower on the large and extra large sizes. But then as it shrinks down right there, nope, right here, it goes to 10 units. Then I actually had it grow or shrink to 8 units to keep it sort of more compact. Again, just a stylistic thing. You don't have to do that. But what I did to make that work was I came over here and I made it column 8 on large and greater. So extra small, small, medium, it's 10 out of 12. So we won't notice a difference. But as I grow it more, once we hit large, which is back there, it now grows, or it shrinks down to be 8 out of 12 units. And so that's what it looks like. Next, we have to tackle the styling, of course. So the color of this header, we got to get this to hide and show. So that part's easy. It disappears once we hit medium and small and extra small. So the way we do that is we come to the image right here, and we can give it the class of display none. So that's going to hide it always. And it's just D none, not display. So it's gone on this one, or it should be. There it is, or there it isn't. And then we go and say, once we hit large, make it inline. So you'll see now it's gone here, but then it reappears there. Okay, next there's one thing we have to do before we start changing colors and font weights and that sort of thing. What we need to tackle is the ordering of everything. So when it shrinks down, this image is coming before our text, and that doesn't really look good on mobile. I want the text to come first. It's more important. So what we do, we didn't really talk about this, but there are classes in Bootstrap that we can take advantage of. that have to do with order. So I can actually assign order to my pieces. So the first thing is this column 6 with the image, and the second one is this one right here. So what we do is use the class's order dash and then give it a number. So let's give this one order dash 2 to say it comes second, and this one order dash 1. And if I refresh, you'll see they swap. And that's not actually what we want, because now they're always swapped. But then I shrink it down and it goes the way that we want it to work. So what we do instead is say order 2, except once we hit medium, now you become order 1. And this one, once we hit medium, you become order 2. So it says this one is always second, except after medium, it becomes first. This one is always first, except after medium, it becomes second. And if we refresh, now, because we're after the medium breakpoint, this one is first, but I shrink it down, and they swap. Next, let's go ahead and style our text, and we'll add in some of this spacing here. So let's go to our app.css, and if you remember, we're using an H2 to make this Museum of Candy. So we could either select all H2s, we could also give this a class. Let's just say all H2s for now, that's fine. I'm going to give them a color, and I'm going to give them, let's start with that, H2s. The color is that red color we've been using already, EA1C, 2C right here. Whoops, I just deleted the color part. All right, so that should change the color. There we go. They are too thick. We need to change the font weight. Same thing that we did right here. Where is that? Font weight 100. So we can copy that. We do have a little duplication going on. You know, we're assigning this color to multiple things, although the hover is one that we can't really refactor. But for example, assigning it to the spans, if you wanted, you could make a class called red or something and apply it to all these elements, but I'm okay with a little extra code. So font weight 100, refresh. All right, so we're getting the thinner. That looks good. We also are going to change the font size a little bit. I think it's too small. If you compare it, this is larger. And I happen to know that it's 2.5 rems. So I just played around with that. So H2's font size, 2.5 rem. Refresh, and it's larger. It's the same size as that. Cool. Next, we have our text in the paragraph, which we gave the class of lead. So it's up to us how we want to select that. We could say all paragraphs, but we might end up using other paragraphs instead. So I think I'm going to come to my index.html here and give each of these divs that contains the text a class. I'm going to call it like blurb or something. And then that way I can say, instead of all H2s in total, just say all H2s inside a blurb. And I need to make that a class. And then I can also say all paragraphs inside of a blurb. That way I'm just not selecting every paragraph ever. Okay, so all paragraphs inside of a blurb, I'm going to say color is a light pink color, which is F498B8. F498B8. And we refresh. All right, so that's the correct color. But there's a couple of other changes to make still. The first one is font weight, which is going to be 100. Next, we're also going to change the font size to be 1.125 rems. And if I refresh, you'll see it gets thinner, and the font size also shrinks a little bit. And then I also want to space out the lines a little bit. You can see this is longer lines, is that the right term? There's more space between lines versus here, it's more condensed. So on these paragraphs, I'll also say line height is 2.0, or I think I can just get away with 2 without the 0.0. There we go. So that's looking close, right? That's the same, well, I'm zoomed way in, but it's the same colors, the same sizes of things. Now we have to worry about the margin between our sections. You'll see that there's not very much room there. And what I ended up doing, it doesn't really work to use the Bootstrap utilities. I mean, you can add a little bit, but they're not made to add like 100 pixels of margin there. So instead, I'm going to do it through CSS. So what are we adding the margin to? Well, it's between right now between this section and this section. So we have a couple of choices for how, when we actually duplicate our sections and make 2 more to round out the rest of the website. Do we want them all to be inside of the same container? Do we want a separate container for each one? It's really up to you how you structure it. I like to make different sections, assuming that the content is different. So if this is supposed to be the about section, I would make this about. If this was the contact, but we could also do it all inside of the same thing and just make a new row for each one. So I might do that instead. So let me just show you what I mean. I'm going to duplicate this entire row. So we have 2 of them. If I refresh the other page, there's 2 of them. And I'm going to give each of those rows another class. What do we call it? Let's give them each class of content or something. So I'll give this one content, and then this second one as well, right here. And then I'll duplicate it later. And so now I can come over here and just say content, give it a margin bottom, for example, or margin top, either one, of 100 pixels. And we refresh, and now we have that spacing between them. So this one we do need to reverse, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But this is looking good. I'll leave it off here for now. In the last video, we're just going to change the images and make our nav bar do this little fill-in effect as you scroll with a little bit of JavaScript. And that's pretty much it. There might be 1 or 2 polishing touches we have left. So the next one will be nice and short.